Okay, so today is 7.2 hunger. The objective for today is that you will be able to describe classic research findings in specific motivation systems. And today we're focusing on eating. So as we go through this, focus on the research. The terms in this lesson are going to be glucose, set point, basal metabolic rate, anorexia nervosis, bulimia, binge eating disorder. Something else that I did for this lesson was I tried to underline the really key points that I want to make sure you write down. That way you don't feel like you have to write down every single thing, but you're focusing on the things that are most important. So, why is it we eat? Well, there's a couple theories. The first is the physiological need. Our bodies need nourishment to relieve hunger. So we get hungry, our stomach growls, we want to eat something. The second part of it is a psychological need. Food provides comfort. It also is a way to socialize. You go out for dinner, and it can relieve boredom, or if you're trying to study or stay up late, sometimes we turn to eating. But there's also reasons why people don't eat, and those are most because of wanting to have control over something, and you can have control over how much you eat or don't eat. Ability to try to lose weight. We've had people go on hunger strikes. Cesar Chavez was known to go on hunger strikes. We've had a variety of different political leaders go on hunger strikes to prove a point. And then sometimes it's just an ability of there's not enough food, or there's no access to food, or it's very limited whatever food they do have. The physiology of hunger, so what actually happens in your body. Well, what we do know happens is that you have stomach contractions, and we call these hunger pangs. And this is what sends signals to the brain that makes you aware of hunger. They found this out because they actually had somebody swallow a special type of balloon. It wasn't like a regular latex balloon. And then anytime that person felt hungry, they pushed a button. And so the balloon would measure if your stomach was contracting. And then they would also measure when you push the button. And what they found is, sure enough, when your stomach was contracting was when we saw spikes in the hunger situation. So kind of cool to see that that does actually play a role in whether or not you're hungry. Now, what happens if your stomach stopped contracting? If all of a sudden we figured out, okay, if your stomach doesn't contract anymore, could you still be hungry? Well, as usual, they decided to test Mickey out and find out. So what they did was they took away some of the rats' stomachs, and they literally attached their esophagus to their intestine. And here is what they found out. Did the rats continue to eat? If you thought the answer was yes, you are correct. They did continue to eat. So what does this show us? Is that hunger persists similarly in humans who, for whatever reason, have had their stomachs removed. What we find is that hunger will still happen, that hunger can still happen without hunger pangs. It might be a little bit different or not quite as intense, or depending on the case, but it does still exist. So this tells us that there's not just a physical aspect, but there's also a psychological aspect to hunger, and there's more to hunger than just having stomach pains. A quick little reminder or some terminology that you guys are going to need to know. We talked about the hypothalamus when we talked about biology, but the lateral hypothalamus is what controls our desire to eat something. And if you stimulate this in a rat, the rat is going to eat and eat and eat and eat, even if there's no other cues telling it to eat. The ventromedial hypothalamus is what controls our satiety, so that means your fullness. So in other words, this part of the brain is what tells you that you are full. When that part of the brain is stimulated, the rat's actually going to starve to death because they don't think that they need to eat anything. So how do you remember the difference between the two of them? Well, the lateral hypothalamus, LH, so you can think LH, and that means large hunger. Ventromedial hypothalamus, VMH, gives one very minute hunger, or the feeling of satiety, the feeling full. Glucose and the brain. Insulin decreases in the blood, which makes you feel hungry. So you might have somebody tell you like they're having a low blood sugar attack, and they could be, but it's because they're hungry and they need to eat something. Level of glucose in the blood is monitored by receptors and neurons in the stomach, liver, and intestine. So for people that have type 1 diabetes, their pancreas doesn't produce insulin anymore, which is part of what we need when we have glucose. So I'm going to get to that in a second. So these neurotransmitters send our messages to the hypothalamus. The reduction of blood sugar or blood glucose stimulates what we call orexin in the lateral hypothalamus. And what happens is when this is stimulated, we see an increase in how much rats will eat. Set point. Many of you might notice this already. I think you're probably a little bit too young, but you still may. Set point is this idea or this body weight that is ideal for you. That if you live a healthy lifestyle, by healthy lifestyle I mean you work out moderately, you eat lots of fruits and veggies and lean proteins, and limit the amount of fat you take. If you do that, the weight that you are naturally under that point is what we call the set point weight. Now, when your body weight falls below this, what we see is we do see an increased hunger because your body's trying to tell you that you have to eat more to get this certain weight. It can also lower what we know as the basal metabolic rate, the BMR, and this may act to restore lost weight. So if you lose weight but you have this kicked in, then there's a possibility that you may end up gaining that weight back just because of this. Taste preference, when we think about things that we want to eat, is that because of our culture that we want to eat them or because of the biology within us? And what we find is it's actually both. It's body chemistry and environmental factors. It influences when we feel hungry, but also what we want to eat and what we have a taste and a craving for. We're going to talk about 3 major eating disorders, the first one being obesity. And obesity is defined as being excessively overweight. And this could lead to issues like cardiovascular, diabetes, hypertension, arthritis, and back problems. The second that we are going to focus on is anorexia. And this is an eating disorder where normal weight people have delusions that they are completely overweight and so therefore don't take in the amount of calories that they need to. We typically see this in adolescent females, and many of them will end up starving themselves, which could potentially allow them to become extremely underweight. The third one that we're going to talk about, or the second one that we're going to talk about, no, this is the third, sorry, third one, is bulimia. And this is a disorder where an individual is going to overeat, and they tend to overeat bad foods. So they're not going to overeat like broccoli and celery, but overeat bad foods. And then this overeating is followed by vomiting or laxatives or even excessive exercise for a long period of time. Binge eating could also be considered a disorder. Binge eating is an episode where you are usually either under stress, you're upset about something, and so therefore you have excessive eating. So excessive eating would be eating, an extreme amount of food. This isn't talking about like Thanksgiving. This is, on a regular basis. And they do this, but they do not work out excessively or throw up afterwards. Then it is not considered bulimia, and it would be considered binge. What causes some people to have eating disorders and others do not? Well, part of it could be genetics. The other part of it could be family. Younger siblings tend to develop these if they have older siblings of the same gender. And also, it can lead to, or you can have levels of chemicals that, for whatever reason, facilitate neural communication with this, causing this to happen. And cultural pressures, what you see in the newspaper every day. So there's 3 areas for eating: biological, psychological, and sociocultural. Remember, biological is your body, so this would be things like your stomach pangs. Psychological is how you're personally processing the information, and this would be things like the sight and smell or the memories that you have. And the third and final is social cultural, and this is where we see cultural influences having, or culture having an influence on your taste. And that's it.